Okay, everyone, I think we'll get started. Greetings, hello. My name is William Meader, and I'm here to present a talk entitled Humanity's Burning Ground. And we have a lot of people that are joining us today, which is quite exciting. And I realize that some of you will be very versed in the esoteric philosophy and perhaps in some of the work I've done around the world. But there will be a lot of people that are also quite new to this, I suspect. And either way, it's lovely that you could join us. And this is a talk that I think will take about 45 minutes or an hour. And then after that, we will do a short group meditation together. This is a talk, so it's not set up for questions and answers, that sort of thing. When I start to do webinars, which is the next step in this journey, that would be, of course, a key part of it. So anyway, let's begin. And I want to talk about, I kind of laid the foundation of our discussion today. And what I'd like to say is that obviously it's clear for all of us that the world is in a severe crisis. It's a remarkable crisis in the sense that it's profoundly global. And none of us have ever experienced anything like this before, at least not in our lifetimes. And therefore, because it's so global, it's really inescapable. We're all going to be part of this. And although this crisis, and particularly the virus issue, is quite related to just questions of basic physical survival, one of the key things I want to highlight is that it's more than a physical issue. I mean, there is a tremendous amount of emotional crisis going on in the world today because of what is happening. Global fear. In fact, if we looked at it that way, in a certain sense, that itself is an epidemic at the moment. If we looked at the issues around the mental nature of our lives, we have a huge rise in worry and real almost crisis thinking, and even paranoia. And for some people, it's even leading to kind of conspiracy kinds of thinking. So it's hitting us on a mental level and an emotional level and a physical level, but also on a spiritual level, because it's a crisis that really kind of forces us to look at our view of life. It tests our faith, really, and our spiritual resolve. And so all of these things together are quite an amplifying effect when it comes to the severity of the crisis that we currently feel ourselves in. But let me share with you what my goal is today. It's actually not to focus specifically on the virus itself. And it's not really to focus on, things like the medical causes or the theories of that, as well as sort of the trajectory of the virus, none of that. Instead, what I want to do is I want to provide all of you with a larger esoteric context within which to recognize the times we are living in, and that the pandemic that is currently occurring is actually a part of a much larger period of crisis. Because really, from an esoteric point of view, humanity has been going through a major crisis for many, many years. It's a huge transitional crisis, which I do want to talk about today. And in a way, what we're really looking at is a convergence of many crises or many crises. And in some sense, as you will see, some of them are actually quite predictable. So my goal is to kind of share with you all how the esoteric philosophy would look at the current situation, and that the pandemic is one piece of a larger crisis pie, you might say. Now, I'd like to talk about it from an astrological perspective, as well as show some rheological correlates. That's a big part of my intention today, but also I want to talk about service, because, in this philosophy, it's understood that the soul itself in each of us, when we wake up to it, it creates a sense of wanting to rise up to serve humanity in some way. The soul in each of us is governed by many laws, and one of them is the law of service. And so I do want to talk about that, because there's no better time to talk about service than at a time of global crisis. And then we will also be concluding at the end with a group meditation. And that meditation is going to be designed to support the restoration of humanity. So with that kind of overview of what I intend to present for you today, let me begin by talking about the root of all the crises that are happening today, the pandemic, as well as the environmental crisis, the social crisis that we're having, international crises that we're having. It's all rooted in what is called the soul of humanity, and rooted in the fact that humanity is one living entity, one being. From an esoteric perspective, the whole human kingdom is a single living entity, and it has a soul, but it also has a personality. And that soul of humanity at this time in history is trying to impress more of its wisdom, its love, its nature into the lower aspects of human society, the personality of society. And that's causing resistance. That's triggering resistance, which is why for the last several years we've really seen some of the worst aspects of government, the worst aspects of business. We've seen the worst aspects of many politicians. And in a sense, I think if we were honest with ourselves, we've probably seen the worst of ourselves at times as well. There's something interesting about this process where when greater light tries to infuse itself into a lower system, shadow issues in that lower system rise up in defiance. It's just like the times in our personal lives, you know, you have a soul, you have a personality, and there are times when the soul is trying to infuse itself more into the personality. And there are times when elements of the personality, lower, more shadowy elements, rise up in opposition. And so it's in the physics of it that this tension is rising. But one of the things to keep in mind from an esoteric point of view is to realize that crisis is always a precursor to the possibility of radical change and transformation. Crisis is often the harbinger of what could be a new and dawning era, at least in potential, for humanity today. To understand this idea of relationship of crisis to evolution, I want to share with you, and some of you know this already, but the human kingdom in its totality is ruled by the fourth ray. That is to say, the soul of humanity is a fourth ray soul. Now, let me explain a little bit about that. I mean, although there are said to be 7 types of rays, which are streams of consciousness from divinity, really, there are 7 types, and they're all present. They're all here in different proportions, but there are larger manifestations of it and lesser manifestations of it. And so though you may have, let's say you personally might be, let's say, a second ray soul, the whole of humanity in its totality is a fourth ray soul, because we're the fourth kingdom of nature. And that ray is called the ray of harmony through conflict. It's not called the ray of harmony and conflict. It's the ray of harmony through conflict. You see, it's in the human kingdom, and only in the human kingdom, where the nature of life as it evolves through that kingdom goes through crisis as a function of lifting to a higher perch of consciousness. There's a whole different set of evolutionary processes that go on in, let us say, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the kingdoms that are said to be higher than our kingdom. But the human kingdom, it's harmony through conflict, not harmony as conflict. And not harmony and conflict. And where does it play out in our individual lives? It plays out in the sense that often we're trying to transform our lower self so that it's more of an effective agent on behalf of our higher self. And there will be at times a battle, and that's what's happening today on a global scale. Much of this process that is happening today, the crises of the day, are related to two major transitions that are believed to be taking place at the same time: an astrological transition and a rheological transition. The astrological transition has to do with the transition from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. And the rheological transition has to do with movement from a sixth ray age to a seventh ray age. So just to highlight the Pisces Aquarius thing for just a moment, although it is said that we are entering into the age of Aquarius, it's important to realize that when we say that, we don't mean that there's no more Pisces. In fact, it's not like one day Pisces ends and the next day Aquarius begins. No, there's a huge overlap, and astrologers have different views about how large that overlap is, but many people, including myself, put it at about a 200-year overlap. And we are, if that is an accurate understanding of it, that means that we are about at the middle of that overlap period. And that poses heightened crisis just because of that. Think of it this way. Think of these two signs, Pisces and Aquarius. See them as great sources from our solar system, living sources within our solar system that energetically and very subtly pattern the consciousness of all of humanity, the collective consciousness. Each sign has a way of organizing perceptions and inclining certain ways of perceiving things. And both of these, at this transitional time, are coexisting in the collective consciousness of humanity. And because that's the case, what happens is you've got some people in the world that have a strong natural kind of resonance with the historical Piscean rhythm, while you have others that are really more and more recognizing the Aquarian quality as something that they more identify with. And that's just getting more obvious and more obvious, and that duality within the consciousness of humanity manifests as heightened polarities within society. And I'm sure you can see it in your society, whatever country you're living in now, that there's quite a bit of polarization. There's not a lot of middle ground. So that is really important. And it's that crisis between the old and the new that is very much the foundation of what we would call the burning ground. The burning ground represents the crisis, or the many crises that are actually part of the coals of that burning ground, and we're all walking it together. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is that all of the crises that we face today, including the pandemic, the various political crises that are going on in my country and all over the world. Clearly, we have a huge environmental crisis. There's and an economic crisis, and an economic crisis that was present long before the coronavirus entered into the scene. And we have tremendous amounts of crisis having to do with inequality, social injustice, that sort of thing. And now, as I said in the introductory letter, that this is also a new variable, a different type of fuel has been added to this collective crisis, and that's microbial. It's the virus itself. So let's begin by looking more deeply into this transitional period, and I'd like to talk about it a little bit more from an astrological perspective, but actually more from a perspective of planets more than signs for just a moment. Because it's very interesting, there actually is something that did occur. There is something that did occur just a couple months ago in the skies that has a huge, huge correlation to the crisis as it's now presenting itself today. It has to do with two planets, the planet Pluto and the planet Saturn. Now, I'd like to just give you an overview of understanding each of these planets and then talk about what the implications are for us. Because you see, these two planets came together in the sky in the very early days of January, the first week, I think it was, of January, where they came together. They were warming in together for many, many months prior to that. But they actually had their tightest connection in the very beginnings of January. And it is actually a rare occurrence that those two planets come together. Well, rare in the sense that just because of the rhythm of those two, you know, Saturn takes 29 years to go around the zodiac and Pluto takes 248 years. So it ends up that when they come together, that happens, it varies a little bit because of retrogrades, but basically it's between 33 and 36 year cycles. And each of these planets are astrologically understood as very, very challenging. In fact, even traditional astrology, not just esoteric astrology, but traditional astrology would refer to them as malefic planets. They're really not. They actually are incredibly important and incredibly important to our evolution. But from a personality point of view, they would seem to have a darker, more challenging influence. So Saturn, for instance, Saturn is the planet most associated with justice and law. It has been called the lawgiver. It's also called the Lord of Karma, the Lord of Karma. And when we think about Saturn, I mean, obviously we think about it in our personal lives. Wherever Saturn is found in your personal chart, it says something about something karmically that needs to be worked through in the life. But it also applies collectively. And that's really important to understand, because the crisis that we are now facing does quite likely have a lot to do with the adjustment that is based upon a karmic need. And this is a planet that stages the lessons that need to be learned by an individual, by a society, or by humanity as a whole. You know, Master Morya, who many of you know is the head of the First Ray Ashram, once said about Saturn, and I paraphrase, but basically he said, Saturn is the planet that applies the pressure in the life, the pressure. And it's particularly strong and effective and tends to shatter where it's trying to put pressure on something and it'll reveal weaknesses. It can shatter or expose the weaknesses within any kind of structure. Now, when I say any kind of structure, for some people it might be relational structures, the structures of their interpersonal relationships. For other people, it could be the structure of their life that they work within, called career. And on a higher level, though, or a collective level, it can represent the structures of society itself. And yet, even though Saturn is a difficult planet, and it's really, really playing strongly in a challenging way in the world today, it is also the planet that we are told escorts humanity to the gate of initiation. You see, Saturn is the planet that ensures that we do the hard work to transform ourselves so that we earn our way to a more enlightened way of being, individually and collectively. So that planet is hugely important as part of this. The other is Pluto. Now, Pluto is a planet that is also quite challenging. It tends to, it's a first ray planet, meaning it has a lot of will and power to it. And it too tends to shake things up. And it too has a destructive quality to it. It's been called the Lord of the Underworld in some of the ancient literature. And it's so interesting because Pluto is how to put it, it's a planet that, as it works through a chart, it tends to not only shake things up, but it's referred to sometimes as the dredger. By that I mean, Pluto's an energetic influence on humanity that tends to dig deep into the unconscious of our individual and collective lives, and it tends to dredge up the shadow issues. I'm using a Jungian term here when I use the word shadow. In esotericism, we might call it the dweller on the threshold. But it tends to bring it up to the surface so that we can see it and says, hey, this is something that has to be worked on. So I guess what I'm saying is Pluto tends to expose where our shadow issues are. And it reveals that which is hidden. It reveals the unseen enemies within and without. Kind of like the virus, an unseen enemy that has now been exposed. You know, Pluto's, it's very interesting. The word plutonium and the word Pluto are related. In fact, the element plutonium was based upon the name Pluto. And they both have that kind of destructive quality to them. But friends, what I'm really trying to say is that these two planets are always in the sky, but they don't come together very often, every 33 to 36 years. And as I say, in early January, that happened this year. And astrologers last year, and working up to the January moment, everybody was worried about it. We didn't know what it was going to look like. No one knew, but we knew this had to be huge, huge. But what added even another flavor to it was that it was occurring in the sign of Capricorn. Because even though it happens let's say every 36 years, each time it does that, it doesn't mean it's in the same sign. But in this case, it was in the sign of Capricorn. And Capricorn is the sign in astrology most associated with all hierarchical structures of power. That's why Capricorn, even in traditional astrology, has been associated with things like government, because it's hierarchical. Business, it too is hierarchical. The military, it's hierarchical. Anything that has a power structure that has hierarchy to it is largely Capricornian. And now here, these two planets, one applying pressure to reveal weaknesses, and the other exposing unseen enemies and shadow issues, are both coming together and playing through Capricorn and challenging the very fabric of our social systems. And clearly we see that in the weaknesses of government today. We're clearly seeing it in the inadequacies that are going on in the medical profession, having to do with being able to adequately respond to this virus. You know, when these two planets come together in any sign, they often will trigger something about it. They can trigger a sense of kind of out with the old and in with the new, and it's not comfortable. For instance, but it always represents the transition from old to new and the destruction of form or the readjustment of form in order to make the new more probable of expression. You know, for instance, just a couple examples. You could go through history and see a lot of this, but a couple of examples is here in the United States in the year 1787, these two planets came together, and it was at the same time that America was, the United States Constitution was being signed. These two planets also came together at the time that Israel became a nation, and look at the consequences of that in terms of how that changed the whole landscape of political patterns in the Middle East. It also happened at the same time that in 1914, at the beginning of World War I, these two planets came together. And actually, interestingly, at the beginning of World War II, at least at the time when Hitler invaded Poland, which most people would say would be the beginning of World War II, those two planets, they were not conjunct, but they were squared. And a square is a 90-degree angle in the sky, and that's almost as challenging as the conjunction is. In fact, it's so, again, but those were not in Capricorn. The last time these two planets came together in Capricorn, well, that's like there's about a 500-year stretch on that. The last time that took place was in the year 1518, which happened to be the same time that in Europe, Martin Luther, he was so frustrated with the Catholic Church that was dominating Western theology for so long. He was frustrated because of the so-called selling of the indulgences. And so he rebelled, and he nailed to a church wall in Germany his 19 points. I think he called them the 19 theses. And that led to really the beginning of the Protestant Revolution, which changed the whole coloring of theology in the Western world. So my point is, these two planets are hugely important in understanding today. And because this conjunction is occurring right in the sign of Capricorn, it's the very social structures that we are immersed within that are likely to feel that pressure and that shakeup. And we clearly see that. We clearly see that. So with that in mind, I want to go back to a little bit more discussion about understanding the soul of humanity, and then in the context of what I've been sharing with you. You know, when we say that we're all one, what we mean is that on the inner levels, there's one living entity called humanity, and it has a soul, as I mentioned. It's a single being. And when we say we are one, it's not that we are just one in kind. Of course we are. We're one in kind. We're all human. We all have the same human needs and so forth. So we're one in kind, yes. But more deep than that, we are one in essence. And that one in essence is the soul of humanity. And your soul and my soul, our individual causal bodies, our individual souls, have a natural energetic rapport and participation in the soul of humanity. In a way, your soul is a cell within the consciousness of that one greater soul. And the principles of the evolution of that soul of humanity through its personality are the same kinds of principles that apply to our individual lives. And so we live in incredibly important times because this is a transitional period, and to live a spiritual life today means it's not just because it feels right and good, but because you're needed more than ever at this time. We all are, to bring the best of us forward in service to humanity in order to bridge this transition and walk the burning ground. Now, even with the discomfort that is going on, and particularly when we think about this pandemic that's also occurring, just realize, and maybe many of you have, is that in a certain sense, this crisis can actually facilitate our ability to start to more clearly see our oneness. Because the pandemic, in a certain sense, is helping us recognize our interdependence and our interconnectedness. It's that recognition that this crisis is facilitating is an absolute important step if we are truly to find ways of living one. You know, this pandemic can kind of strip us from from the non-essentials and really focus on the essentials. It helps us universalize our thinking about life in the process. That's why some people even call this virus the great equalizer, because it touches everybody, all people of all strata, in all countries, all races, everybody. It's a testing time. It's a time when we have a greater opportunity to examine many of our assumptions about life and who we are and where we want to go. It's a great opportunity to really to pause and say, okay, a new chapter of life could begin here, not just for humanity, but particularly also myself, in terms of how do I be more spiritually effective in service to the greater whole. It's a great opportunity for a more authentic self-evaluation and a rededication to something that you feel inwardly called to do. And so the point is that it's a silver lining that I'm really talking about here. We're now more able to see through acts of kindness. We see people doing the most remarkable things to serve others at this critical time. Acts of kindness, helpfulness, the profound sacrifice that some people are making in order to help other people. These are wonderful indications of an awakening of sorts, or a reawakening. And in many ways, this whole crisis has the power to awaken us or get us back on track toward our higher values, because it helps us recognize what is important, what are our values. It's wonderful to see how around the world, all of these medical research facilities everywhere around the world are collaborating to try to find solutions to the current problem. In a way, it's sort of like, there's an irony here in a certain sense. The irony is that isolation, because we are isolated in our private homes, it's sort of, it forces us to become more aware of the actual need for each other by the lack of it. In other words, physical disconnection helps us recognize our deeper connectedness. So it's sort of like, it reminds me of that old phrase, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Absence makes consciousness recognize that we're all one. In a certain sense, it transcends everything. You know, the virus itself, it transcends nations, borders, races, ages. It transcends nationalism. In a way, the very fact that the virus itself has no restrictions to global expansion, in a way, it's teaching us about what it means to be one, and that we are all truly one. Not just in kind, but in essence. And look, there's no question that the suffering that people are experiencing today is just so profound, and it touches. It's very difficult to see the suffering that is taking place now, the world of heartbreak is accented incredibly strong right now, but. You know, in another sense, often heartbreak can help awaken us to the heart of humanity. I think that this crisis is also helping us to, or encouraging us, I should say, to think about how life can be lived more with greater simplicity. We're kind of forced to, and we're learning that we can do it. It's helping us recognize the absolute essentialness of renewability of things. And it's, in the long run, it's helping us to ultimately awaken to what is fairness, what is universal justice. Friends, all of this is taking place in a container that has to do with what this philosophy would say, the first initiation. The first initiation is, when an individual takes the first initiation, it often means that that person, their heart chakra is widening greatly, and a real sense of deepening, a deep love of humanity is being experienced, and that they then commit themselves to trying to find ways of serving humanity. You know, it is said that the first degree initiate, what that person does in terms of how they live their lives, is they actually are committed to uplifting humanity and doing so with a longer view. And why I'm bringing that up is because we're told in the esoteric literature that humanity at this transitional time of ages is actually approaching the first initiation in its collectivity. And so, and always, crisis is at the front door of any major expansion of consciousness, as I mentioned earlier. And this initiation has many names, but it's most often called the birth initiation, the birth of, it sometimes is called the birth of the Christ within the heart, but it isn't a Christian notion. It's the birth of a fuller, more selfless expression of love on behalf of humanity. In many ways, what humanity is trying to do now, it's struggling, and it's been struggling for several decades now, is to understand, and it has to find its oneness. And, you know, there's real challenges in terms of that, because all of those shadow issues are rising up in defiance. And what is the key to understanding how humanity must find that oneness? Well, it's one of the most important principles in esotericism. It's called the principle of right relationship. You see, if it is a time, a crisis period where we're all trying to find our oneness, it can really only be done if we actually get into the thought process of what constitutes right relationship. It is said that the soul of humanity, as it impresses itself on the personality of humanity, which represents, by the way, the personality represents cultural biases, historical patterns, nationalistic tendencies, those sorts of things, that we have to understand what is right relationship of all the parts within the living whole. What is the right relationship that we should have, for instance, with, what is the right relationship between nation and nation? What's the right relationship to have between men and women, between religion and religion, between a government and those it governs, between humanity and resources, between humanity and Mother Nature? Everything is based upon right relationship in order to move forward toward oneness. And the first initiation is very much about that. So, friends, we are walking the burning ground toward a great initiatory opportunity. There's no guarantee we'll get there, although admittedly I'm still optimistic. And it's quite likely that this could occur in this century. And that the pain that we are experiencing as we approach this birth initiation is by analogy equivalent to the birth pangs of giving birth. And often it is, you know, that old saying, it's often darkest just prior to the dawning hour. Well, welcome to the darker period just prior to the dawning hour. And one of the things that is so important to understand when it comes to this first initiation and humanity crossing those hot coals together, and we have to do it together, it's the one humanity, is that the seventh ray is incredibly important as a function of that process. In fact, it is said that we are in the dawning of the seventh ray age, just as we are in the dawning of the Aquarian age. And there's a relationship between Aquarius and the seventh ray as well. The seventh ray, you know, is the ray that is said to be the pattern of consciousness that wants to ground something. The seventh ray is a ray that wants to, it's called the ray of ceremonial order and magic, which sounds very mystical, but it's really the ray of practical mysticism, really. And it has a lot to do with spiritualizing matter. The seventh ray is going to increasingly, over the next many decades, is going to increasingly start to shape or subtly contribute to the pattern of human thought. And that's going to lead us, and is already leading many people, to really want to ground spirituality. And the seventh ray is very much about restructuring things. It has a lot to do with restructuring the patterns of society, to reorganize how it is that we come together in the outer world and organize our lives in such a way that more of the best of the human spirit can be found expressed through those new organizational patterns, those new societal structures that Pluto and Saturn are now putting pressure on to reveal those weaknesses. But it's the seventh ray that is the ultimate saving force in a certain sense here, because it's all about arranging things anew to create another kind of society. In fact, one of the rays, and there's many rays for each of these, one of the names of the seventh ray, it's called the ray of accurate arrangement and formation. It's a ray that wants to help humanity to recognize that, that we are all one and that we have to work together. In fact, it's been, you know, the seventh ray age has other names. For instance, in some of the literature, it's been called the age of cooperation. It's also been called the age of understanding. It's also called the age of restoration. In fact, the ray itself has sometimes been called the spirit of restoration. It's also called the age of mutually shared responsibility. All of those are just titles for the energetic age that we are just beginning to enter into now. It facilitates a more rhythmic approach to life. It helps us to recognize and connect in more healthier ways. You know, it is the ray most associated with establishing right relationship and interrelationship. On two levels, by the way. It does so horizontally and vertically, you might say. It does so horizontally in as much as the seventh ray has it tends to shape patterns of consciousness in such a way that we realize that everything is interconnected. All people, all cultures, all that we do as a humanity, everything is interconnected, and that what happens in one place has a rippling effect in everywhere else. So it has a lot to do with interdependence and heightening our appreciation of it and a greater willingness to live in that way. But then the other form of it is vertical. In other words, inside each of us, the seventh ray is going to more and more help us relate that higher part of you with that lower part of you, help relate the soul with the personality in right relationship, help relate spirit to matter. The whole story is about the spiritualization of form in the seventh ray. In fact, you know, these rays, some of you know this, but each of these rays is said to have a kind of mantra or a kind of keynote. And the mantra or the keynote for the seventh ray is, may the highest and lowest meet. May the highest and lowest meet. May spirit, may soul, may the soul of humanity interface and meet and be grounded through the personality of humanity. That's the goal. That's the goal, friends. And it also is very much related to this notion of magic or creativity and the idea that the seventh ray has the ability to pattern perceptions to make all of us more effective at taking our new and creative ideas and bringing them out into the outer world as a function of service. This is why the seventh ray is most associated with the so-called art of soulful magic, which is one of my favorite subjects, actually. So I hope this gives you a larger context to understand really what's going on from an occult perspective. It's an exciting time that we live in. It's a stressful time. And your abilities, your gifts, you know, each of us is a vessel of light. Each of us. Each of us has something wonderful to contribute to the whole. And whatever that is in you, it's more needed now than ever. It's interesting too, because when we think of service, and as I mentioned earlier, service is like an inherent quality built into the causal body, the soul itself. But when we talk about it, usually we think about it as a function of getting out in the world and doing something that is good for everybody, that is helpful, that uplifts. And we often think about it in a kind of tangible activity way. And there's a lot of merit to that. Of course it is. Of course, that's part of it. But, you know, right now we can't move. Right now we are in isolation. And yet, let us not forget that service has 3 levels of engagement with humanity, not just physical. Because service can be rendered through the emotional dimension of our lives. Service can be rendered through the mental dimension of our lives. It's important for us all to remember that, you know, that there is not, that we each have a mental and emotional bodies, vehicles, you might say, for the soul. So we have these instruments, but each of those instruments are part of and contributing to the collective mental field of humanity and the collective emotional field. So what I'm saying here is that when you think about service, don't only think about physical. This is a great time to be thinking about service from an emotional and mental perspective, because we can't get out physically and do things that we feel we could do to make things better. Or we're not as able to, I should say. So for me and for many people, I think it's a really important time to be looking at ourselves and saying, what are my thoughts like during this crisis? What are my emotions like during this crisis? Because you see, every thought we have individually and every feeling we have individually is not only being experienced within your vehicle, mental body or emotional body, but it also has a rippling effect as a vibratory contribution to the collective mental body of humanity and to the collective emotional body of humanity. And so my point here is that it's really important at this time for us, us meaning those who are trying to awaken to the soul and trying to want to make a difference in a positive way for humanity's future and support the soul of humanity. Can we do something that is much more around the lines of bringing the kinds of thoughts into the mental field that will support that future, the kinds of feelings within the mental field that uplift rather than instigate further fear? So this is the basis of magic, as I said earlier. I mean, the basis of magic is the process of building thought forms. In fact, according to the Tibetan and the Alice Bailey writings, it has been said that another term for soulful magic is the art of thought form building. Can we think about things more deliberately? Can we think about the notion that every thought we have has a precipitating effect into the field, and we do have the opportunity to choose our own thoughts? Let us think about that. And it's also the principle that I would like us to hold when we do this group meditation, which I'd like to start moving toward here. So now that you have this larger picture, I thought it'd be nice for us all to do a meditation together. And we have so many people here. And realize that what I want to do, and this is going to be a little bit different type of meditation. This is not the kind of meditation where we're just going to go into that deep, quiet place and be very still. Those type of meditations certainly have their place and are wonderful, but this is much more of an active meditation that I'd like us, to invite you all to participate in. So before we do that meditation, I kind of want to give you a little bit of an overview of how I'm going to lead it. It's a guided meditation, and I'm going to lead it by, first, I want you to realize that internally we are all one, as I've been saying all along. But internally, this group that is meditating together, which could well be in the hundreds, we can also together relate to each other internally as a single unit. And we can together as a single unit shape thought forms that in a larger way have a precipitating effect into the collective mental field of humanity. And so what I'd like to do in this meditation is I'd like to first take you through kind of a sensitivity to your chakras, lead you through that. Then I'm going to ask you to draw inward as deep as you can meditatively. And I want you to reach to the deepest place you can, a place deep inside where you kind of feel like you are connected to all things, and you're really in that place, that feel, that's where you start to realize that this is the place of soul deep inside. And then I want to give you that sense while there of the tightening of this group today, meditatively, as if this group is one entity itself in support of the soul of humanity. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to guide us through the process of looking at 3 institutions within society and I will share some brief thoughts in meditation about ways of looking at the future for those institutions as humanity does eventually move into a new and dawning era. So I want to touch on the subject of government in this meditation and invite you to be thinking about the reformation or the restoration of government along a higher set of values. I'm going to have us look at the whole function of what we would call the Department of Business and Economics, which is so crucial to the future of humanity, and understanding how that has to find right relationship to the whole. And then I'm going to focus on religion and the tremendous religious tension that exists around the world. And I'm going to share with you some thoughts in the meditation and invite you to ponder those thoughts. But I want you to ponder it as if you are that larger group and that we are all doing this together. It's as if one mind is thinking, and therefore one mind is shaping some of the vibrations within the mental field, seeding the mental field with the thought forms that would indeed be very useful as humanity gets beyond this crisis. When that is, I don't know. I don't know. And neither does science, really. There's this talk about a gradual waving process down. We just don't know the length of it. But the day will come when things open up in a much bigger way for us. And the goal is to have these thought forms already built into the collective consciousness so that they're more easily accessible to the wider population as we start to rebuild or restore humanity and around the world in each country. Okay. So let's do that. I think this meditation will be probably about 15 or 20 minutes long. We will end it by, and I'll step you through this, but we'll end it by chanting together the Om 3 times. And then after we're done with that, I'll come back onto the screen here and just a couple closing comments that I'd like to share with you before we end our day together. So with that, let's do this, okay? So I'm going to put an image up here that is it's been thought of as sort of an image that is representing the third eye in a certain sense. And a lot of what we want to do in this meditation is related to the third eye. So let's begin. Now, seating yourself comfortably, I'd like you to close your eyes and for a moment, just focus on your breathing. And as you breathe, try to create an evenness in your breath cycle so that the inhale and exhale are of equal duration. Notice how the entire inner life tends to quiet down through the evenness of breath. And as you breathe, imagine that all of your chakras are breathing in synchronization with your physical breath. This is the breath of life itself. And now I'd like you to gently move your attention away from your breath cycle and direct your thoughts or your attention toward your heart chakra. And as you focus on your heart, imagine that a deeper, softer, wiser kind of love is becoming more evident through your heart. And feel that selfless type of love increase and become radiatory from your heart, radiating in all directions. And now I'd like you to move your attention to your throat chakra. It's through this chakra that the soul's divine ideations are generated and find expression. And as you focus on that chakra, feel it coming alive. Feel it becoming galvanized, enlivened. And now, gently move your attention to the crown chakra, just above your head. Here's where the purpose of the soul makes entrance into our lives. For a few moments, focus there and imagine that a sense of energetic purpose is descending and entering into your system through that chakra. Will and purpose. And now, from that point, move your attention to the Ajna center, the point between the eyebrows. Put your focus there as if that's where you are. This is said to be the meeting place of soul and personality, and the place where the directional urge of the soul is registered. And now from that point, I'd like you to begin to draw yourself inward. Begin to move your consciousness into a deep place, a place where it's subtler, non-physical. Feel yourself moving away from physical sensation into this deeper, more expansive place. It should feel like you're moving into a place where you feel like you're connected to all things. A stillness that embraces a wholeness. It's as if it feels like you're coming home. This is the place of soul. This is the region of your causal body. This is the place of your eternity. And when you find that quiet, expansive place, silently chant the Om to affirm your position. And now, while holding yourself in this deep, subtle place, realize that everyone meditating together right now, that we are all trying to hold ourselves in that same subtle dimension. And that we are all there for the same reason. So as you hold yourself there, begin to imagine that slowly you are coming into energetic rapport with this entire group. And that every breath you take, internally there's a feeling of greater fusion with this inner group. And imagine also that this inner group is being energetically supported by the soul of humanity. And now, as you hold yourself there, as a group, as a singularity, let us begin to ponder together various facets of the human condition. And we want to ponder together so that we seed progressive ideations into the collective mental body of humanity. Ideas that will become incredibly useful as we move into the future. And let us start with the Department of Government. And in your own mind, begin to think about how it is that government must become, or what it needs to become in the future, to realize that governments must move from a preoccupation with nationalistic thinking to international thinking, to not just be preoccupied with national citizenry, but the world community. And that underlying governmental urge within society needs to be governed by a belief in the sacredness of the human family. And the platform for political life is to stand on the platform of goodwill. So for a few moments, ponder more. Create thoughts related to governments and how they must evolve into the future. And now, let us together shift to the Department of Business and Economics, knowing it to be an essential divine aspect for the future of humanity. And imagine that entire societal system of thought, that its destiny is to ultimately create right distribution of resources to ensure the sustenance of all life on this planet. That's its divine mandate. And consider the notion that the business world must more and more move from a competitive approach to a globally cooperative approach. Let us ponder this. And now, let us move to the subject of religion, the so-called Department of Religion. An area of humanity in great crisis. And as you ponder religion and its role within the larger society, see if we can try to create thought forms that create more tolerance toward the differing religious views of life that are in the world today. The attitude that there are many roads to the divine. And the recognition that no religion has the total truth, but every religion has a piece of it. Let us ponder that. And now, draw yourself back into that deep, quiet place. Try to feel your connection with the larger group. And I would like us to provide one more gift to the collective consciousness of humanity. And that's the gift of love. And the gift of love as it has the power to overcome fear and has the power to unite us like no other energy can. Indeed, love is the memory of the original condition of oneness. And each of us, and collectively, we are agents of that. So while holding yourself as a group in this deep place, let us again enliven our heart chakras. And begin to imagine the projection of love throughout the world. In your mind's eye, see this projection as having a healing and uplifting effect on the whole of humanity. And now draw yourself back again to the quiet place. Be very still. Feel your connection to the soul of humanity. Know that that connection is always there for you. We just have to go find it. And know that the work done through this meditation is to seed new thought forms. And that in time those thought forms will germinate and become enlivened, active ideas that can help humanity move forward as we begin to restore the human condition and enter into a new and dawning age. So in honor of that, let us close this meditation by softly chanting the Om together 3 times. Okay. Thank you all for participating today. And I want you to know that I am planning to do more formal webinars. So this today is simply a talk, but some webinars are coming down the line that that you will be made aware of, assuming you are on the Emergent Light mailing list. If you're not, many of you would be, but if you're not and you'd like to be, just go to emergentlight.com and subscribe, and you'll get notifications when these newer webinars are coming forward for us. Again, thank you so much for being part of this. And in closing, I just want to remind us all that we each have a gift. We each have something special to give to the world. And your gift is needed more now than any time, than any other time in history. And I know if we all do our best and all remember that we are one in this together, I have no doubt in my mind that the soul of humanity will smile and look well upon all of us. Thank you all for coming again. Many blessings to you. Stay safe and healthy. Take care. Bye for now.